When you take a closer look at this theory, everything starts to fall into place in a much more natural way. The fairy godmother doesn't show up at just any moment. She appears exactly when Cinderella needs her the most. It's way too precise to be just coincidence. It feels like someone who knew exactly when to step in, and that already changes how you see the whole situation. Because it doesn't feel like luck, it feels planned. Another detail is how the fairy godmother shows up already understanding everything. She doesn't ask questions, doesn't try to figure out what's going on. She just knows. She knows what Cinderella wants, knows what to do, knows how to help. That goes beyond empathy. It feels like someone who's been through the same thing before. And when you compare the two, their personalities are really similar. Cinderella, even after everything she goes through, stays calm, kind, and never loses hope. The fairy has that exact same essence, just with more confidence, like someone who's already lived through it all and made it out the other side. Even visually, the movie drops a few hints. They're both constantly associated with the color blue, which doesn't seem like just an aesthetic choice. It gives off this sense of continuity, like one is a more evolved version of the other. And then there's the whole midnight thing. It's always been treated as just some random limit of the magic. But if you look at it from another angle, it starts to feel more like a rule. Like she has a specific window of time to act and then she has to leave. And when you put all of this together, the exact moment she shows up, the way she acts, how much she already knows, it starts to feel less like coincidence. Another detail that really stands out when you compare the two is the way they move physically. Their gestures are very similar. Soft, delicate movements, that calm posture. It doesn't feel random. It gives off a sense of continuity, like it's the same person at different stages of life. And even the way the fairy reacts to situations kind of gives that away too. She anticipates everything. She knows how Cinderella is going to feel, knows what to say, knows when to act. There's no moment where she's figuring things out. She shows up already prepared, and that's where the magic comes in, which also takes on a whole new meaning within this theory, because maybe it's not just about transforming things. It could be more about representing everything Cinderella has learned throughout her life. Like that magic is actually the result of experience, growth, everything she's been through. The pumpkin turning into a carriage, for example, stops being just a pretty trick and starts to feel like an extension of how Cinderella has always seen the world. Even in bad situations, she was able to see something better in them. In the future, that would become something more concrete. And the whole midnight thing also shifts a bit when you look at it this way. It doesn't feel like just a random limit. It really feels like a rule. It's like there's a specific window of time to interfere, and after that, it's just not possible anymore. Because if you think about time travel, it actually makes sense for there to be some kind of restriction. You can't just go around changing everything freely, and then all of this starts to fit together better. The magic stops being just a fairy tale device and starts to feel more like a form of intervention. Something deliberate, controlled, with a clear purpose. And even the idea of time travel, which might sound a bit out of place in this kind of story, doesn't feel that absurd within this universe. Because in the end, these stories have always played around with different rules than reality. They've already messed with time, fate, reality, just in more fantasy-coded ways. So imagining that Cinderella herself, in the future, found a way to go back and adjust the course of her own story starts to feel less impossible than it did at first. Another detail that makes this theory even more interesting is the way the fairy godmother handles time. She doesn't just mention midnight, she insists on it multiple times. It doesn't feel like just a detail of the magic, it feels more like a warning. Like she knows exactly what happens if that limit is crossed. And that doesn't sound like someone improvising, it sounds like someone who's already been through it. Because if she really is a future version of Cinderella, it makes sense that she'd know exactly how far she can go without messing everything up. It's not about changing everything, and it's about tweaking only what's necessary. She doesn't interfere in every single detail of the story. She does the basics, makes sure Cinderella gets to the ball, and that's it. The rest she lets unfold on its own. Like she knows that small changes would already be enough to shift the future. And there's another point that kind of goes unnoticed. She never explains who she is. She doesn't say where she came from, doesn't share anything about herself, doesn't go into detail. She shows up, fixes the situation, and leaves. And that might not be random, because if she said too much, she could end up changing Cinderella's behavior. It could confuse her, create doubt, or even make her act differently than she's supposed to. So she keeps everything simple, does what needs to be done, and exits the scene. And when you put that together with everything else, the perfect timing, the way she understands everything, how confidently she acts, it starts to feel less like random help and more like someone making sure the story plays out the right way. This theory also changes how we see time itself within the story. Midnight stops being just a detail to build tension and starts to feel like a real limit. Like there's an actual effort to make everything happen happen within a short window without drifting too far from what was already supposed to happen. Instead of just luck, it starts to feel more like a race against time. And that shifts the weight of the story quite a bit, because now it's not just about a girl who randomly got the perfect chance. It's about someone trying to fix her own life, making very specific decisions so everything works out. And that also messes with the whole idea of destiny. Usually Cinderella is seen as someone who was destined to have that happy ending, but in this theory, nothing is guaranteed. What really exists are choices. She doesn't wait for things to happen, she makes them happen. And that makes the story way more interesting, because it turns Cinderella from someone passive into someone who at some point takes control of her own story. And when you look at it from this angle, even the magic changes meaning. It no longer feels like something coming from the outside, like random help. It feels more like an extension of herself, like it's the result of everything she's lived through, learned, and built up over time. And then there's a question that completely changes how you see the ending. Did she actually go back and change everything? Or was it exactly this process of trying to fix the past that turned her into who she needed to be? If you're into this kind of theory that completely flips the way we see stories we thought we already knew, make sure to drop a like. It really helps the channel keep bringing content like this. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. There's a lot more theories, hidden details, and different takes coming your way. Now tell me, for you, is the fairy godmother just a helper, or Cinderella herself fixing the past?